Superman Unlimited #1 from DC Comics begins a new era for the Superman, the Super Family, and the Earth as a whole. Is it worth the cover price to read Dan Slott's take on the Man of Steel? Let's find out in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. After reading Superman Unlimited #1, my reaction is, this is okay, I guess. Sure, why not? Dan Slott uses his first full issue take on Superman to give you a small setup with big consequences, and they're pretty big, and a whole lot of rehash and filler in the middle. If you've never heard of Superman, this first issue is a great primer to get you introduced to the character with a pretty solid cliffhanger. But if you're like me, and pretty much everybody else is probably going to be picking up this comic, you know most of what he's going over, so it really feels like a lot of filler. But before we get to the score, why don't we talk about the pros and cons, and you can make up your own mind, starting with what's positive about Superman Unlimited #1. Dan Slott's debut ticks all the familiar notes for a tried and true Superman story, even going so far as to give readers a mini retrospective on Big Blue's history to set the foundation for what Dan Slott has planned for this version of Superman in the series. All the historical notes feel right. I mean, you've got Krypton, you've got the explosion, the Kent farm, growing up with superpowers, how he got his glasses. It's all here. And there's even a little bit of heartwarming nod to the Donner films with a little bit of fan service baked in. Not too much, but just enough to make you feel good about it. And finally, the cliffhanger, which is pretty strong and pretty big, sets up a new status quo for the entire world, and even the Super Family. Now, whether or not that sticks, well, that remains to be seen, but it's pretty good. So that brings us to the negatives and what's not great about Superman Unlimited #1. If you're a Superman fan and well acquainted with one or more versions of the character's history, this issue will look and feel a lot like a rehashed filler that doesn't tell you anything you didn't already know, except for the little bits of new story. If you're a Batman fan, for an example, imagine a new creator, and we do have a new creator coming on board, Batman, Matt Fraction, here in a month or so. Imagine him coming onto the book and spending about 75% of the first issue recounting Batman's origin story, including the grossly overused pearls in Crime Alley and his parents dying and him being alone and finding the Batcave. All the elements are there. Imagine that's 75% of the first issue, and you're like, what the heck is this? I already know about Batman. Well, that's what happens here. You get 75% of this issue is devoted to telling you everything you already knew about Superman for some reason. There's technically nothing wrong with the facts Slott presents. It's not like he's retconning his history in any significant way, but they're a redundant recap that takes time away from the original story, such as it is. Who thought that was a good idea? Now let's switch gears and talk about the art, which honestly is a little bit of a mixed bag. We have Rafael Albuquerque on artwork, and his presentation of the Man of Steel at his heroic best looks great. The power and scale for the action scenes are wholly on point because you have a big action set piece that frames where the story is going next, and it looks pretty darn good. That said, Albuquerque makes odd face shape choices with Clark Kent and his supporting cast. In a few spots, Clark's face looks like it's literally melting. In short, the art is good whenever you have Superman doing super things, but when you get the individual personal moments with characters just talking and interacting with each other, their faces look really weird. Alright, so let's dig into the plot, and you can see where this story is going and why we feel the way we do. Dan Slott's inaugural turn on Superman begins with introductions at the Daily Planet. Imani Edge, Morgan Edge's ex-wife, obtained the newspaper in her divorce settlement, so now she owns the Daily Planet brand. She intends to use the Daily Planet brand to establish news and media outlets around the world, everywhere from Russia to Themyscira, including misinformation policing for several of the world's biggest social media platforms. I'm not sure that's going to turn out so well, but that's where Slott's going with this. Edge insists she'll remain a silent, impartial benefactor while Lois Lane becomes the new head of this global media empire. During the big announcement, Clark flies off when Superman is needed for an assortment of rescues. What follows is a long succession of montage scenes where Superman is saving cats up a tree, he's saving boats that are sinking, he's saving planes that are crashing, and doing all the typical things you'd expect Superman to do. It's very much indicative of the Superman 78 films directed by Richard Donner. In between all the different acts of heroism, you get these little montage snippets of flashback scenes depicting Superman's history way back from Krypton to Krypton's explosion, to the ship crashing in Kansas, to being raised by the Kents, how he got his glasses, how he got his uniform made for him the first time by Ma Kent, all of it. So there is a lot of basically retelling Superman's backstory in this issue, and so much so that it crowds out everything else. Now, the very last mission he gets is a call from the Watchtower about a massive meteorite made of inertron, I think I'm saying that right, which is headed right for Earth. The meteorite wasn't detected sooner because inertron is invisible to modern warning systems. Privately, Superman knows that inertron will be a highly prized organic alloy in the 31st century, so he's familiar with it and he understands why they didn't catch it sooner. So Superman flies up into space, he intercepts the meteorite and gives it a big ol' super punch. But, surprise! The inertron falls away, it's only a thin crust or a layer around the meteorite, it all crumbles away, and what's underneath? A massive meteorite made entirely of kryptonite. Superman doesn't have any time, he doesn't have any choice, so he's got to punch and push the thing out of the way to make sure it doesn't impact a major city and destroy a continent or two. So he latches onto the meteorite, imbuing him with all this kryptonite radiation, and he does his best to kind of nudge it and push it and move it out of the way. Eventually, he does get it to its place, positioned over some water so it doesn't hit a landmass, but he's trapped underneath it, and the thing crashes down. As he's burning through Earth's atmosphere, his life is flashing before his eyes, and he's calling out to John Kent, telling him to tell his parents that he loves them, to tell Lois that he loves them, and to just be a good kid. But the meteorite eventually crashes down with Superman crushed underneath it. But wait, of course, Superman isn't dead. I mean, if he would be, it'd be a really short series. He wakes up 3 months later aboard the Watchtower, and much has changed. That sounds familiar. Didn't that happen to Batman at the end of Night Terrors? Okay, well, whatever. Kryptonite is now readily available across the Earth, and the nation-state of El Caldero converted the nearby mega supply of kryptonite into a mega business, making it the most advanced nation on Earth. And if you're wondering how did Superman survive getting crushed under a kryptonite meteorite, apparently it didn't kill him, his body adapted somehow that isn't explained, and he developed a spectrographic resistance to kryptonite that makes him look golden in color under certain forms of light. So in other words, he's sort of like gold blacklight Superman, I guess? Okay, sure. Final thoughts, what do we think about Superman Unlimited #1? It finds the Man of Steel flying off on a suicide mission of sorts to stop a meteorite made of kryptonite. But the end of the mission is the start of a new era for Earth, Superman, and the Super Family. Dan Slott's big idea is a pretty big one, and I like where it's going. It's very intriguing. Unfortunately, the meat of the idea is lost in a sea of fatty recaps, rehashes, and redos about Superman's history that honestly doesn't add anything to the story and doesn't tell you anything you didn't already know. Plus, you have Raphael Albuquerque on art, which is generally good during the action scenes and the high-flying stunts, but a bit rough when it comes to faces and people interacting with each other. If Slott can put his weight behind a fully original issue, we'll see if he presents an all-you-can-eat feast for Superman fans, but for now, this is a sort of wait-and-see issue. In short, it was a little bit underwhelming. Therefore, Superman Unlimited #1 from DC Comics earns a 7 out of 10. I didn't mind this issue, it's just a lot of rehash and retelling of stuff we already knew, and very little original material. I'm not sure that's the greatest way for Dan Slott to kick off his Superman career now that he's come over to DC Comics. I think that was a miscalculation. But you know what? What do you think? I want you to give me your opinion about this story if you've read it. Did you like the full recap and the retelling of the Superman mythology? Did you think it was a waste of time, or did you really get excited for where the story is going next, knowing how Dan Slott views this character? I don't know. You tell me. So, thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more reviews just like this one.